Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm going to be making an animatic for the first time. If you don't know what an animatic is, it's basically like an animation that you line up to music, but it's not fully animated, you kind of just draw the larger movements or moments. I've always wanted to try making one, but I never have because YouTube doesn't like if you use copyrighted music. However, recently YouTube updated its music library to let creators license music for video use. And they will give me my first song for free if it's under $15, and I'm cheap, so I'm going to be making use of this. So yeah, step one of making the animatic was finding a song. And if you know anything about the YouTube audio library, you probably know it often doesn't have the greatest of music. There are some really good songs, but there's also a lot of not so good songs. So I spent, I think, around 2 hours searching for a song that I kind of liked. I wanted something that would make sense with one of my characters and their story. I kept trying to find different songs for different characters. Some songs, the lyrics would make sense, but I wouldn't like the style or sound of the song. For some of the songs, I liked the style, but not the lyrics. And after a long while, I found the song I'm Shy by Joe Ed. It was within the $15 amount, so I could purchase the license and use it in my video without YouTube getting mad at me. So yay, I don't like YouTube being mad at me, so I like to avoid that. If you know my OCs, you can probably guess I'm going to use this song for Doris because she is shy, like the song says. So now that I have a song, I need its lyrics. I searched the song on Spotify, but it didn't have the lyrics on there, so then I went to YouTube, and thankfully the lyrics were in the description of the video. I could have typed out the lyrics myself, but I was having a hard time understanding some of the lyrics, so I'm glad I found the lyrics written out. So I could use the song as is, but the thing is that it's kind of long and I don't have enough time to draw pictures for the entire song, so I'm going to shorten the song. I'm going to make the intro, the last chorus repeat, and the outro all mushed together. I was a bit nervous you'd be able to hear where I piece things together, but with a lot of fiddling with the timing, I was able to make a pretty seamless transition. So yay! And with the editing, the song is now just a little over a minute, and I feel like I can get that done. So we have the song, now let's start drawing. Actually, we're not going to get drawing yet. I forgot we need to do a bit more prep work. I made a canvas that is 1920 by 1080 pixels. This is the resolution for my video, so my drawings will fill the whole screen. This is optional, but I did make my canvas larger to give me some extra area to draw outside of. All of this will be cropped out and not included. I added this area to allow me to draw outside the border a little bit, and I can also put the text that I need to see along the top. Speaking of the text, I use the text tool and copy and paste in the different lines of lyrics. I'm doing this so it's easier for me to remember the lyrics as I'm working on the drawings. Speaking of the drawings, I will now do some really rough thumbnail sketches to help me get my ideas out from my head. My idea for this animatic is that Doris is at school and she seems worried about needing to socialize. She ends up seeing Chase and he kinda waves at her. Doris becomes flustered, runs away and hides, and Chase comes and finds her and she gets the courage to interact with him. Also, I don't really know if this is an interaction that actually happened between Chase and Doris. So I don't know if it's canon, but I could see it being something that happened, especially in the early chapters of the story, or maybe sometime after season 2, chapter 9 possibly. If I had to place it, I'd probably place it around there. But it could also be in the earlier chapters, I don't really know. Anyways, now it's time for drawing. Like I said, animatics aren't fully animated. You kind of just draw pictures for the bigger moments and motions. I ended up drawing 33 frames for mine. That's quite a lot, so let's not waste any time and start going through my process for them. For the first 2 frames, they are just the intro. I included the name of the song and its creator, and that the animatic was made by me. I write out the text once and then write it out again because I want the text to have a bit of wiggle to it. So if I switch back and forth between these 2 frames, they kind of wiggle like this. I always think it's a cute touch and makes the text more interesting. So for this first frame, apparently I wasn't recording and you will only see the later half of the footage for this frame. I'm annoyed with myself for missing some of the process, but it is what it is. Side note, I'm drawing over 3D models that I placed for the background characters to make the process faster. I needed to draw 33 images in a short amount of time, so be prepared for me to be taking a lot of shortcuts. Anyways, this first image goes with the lyrics "Here It Comes Again." I thought I would have Doris be entering school. We are staring at her back and she is surrounded by people. I wanted the feeling of the scene to be a little off-putting. The lyrics are talking about insecurity coming into the mind again, but I also thought I could use it to suggest another day of school starting. To make the scene look extra crowded, I took a crowd texture from the library and applied it to the background. It definitely helped fill in all the kind of smaller gaps. Also, a lot of times for animatics, things are kept more sketchy and maybe only have some simple shading or the values are blocked in. So I'm going to limit myself to only using grayscale. I'm going to keep the drawings more sketchy. I do clean them up a decent amount because I do want things to be readable and easy to make out, but they're definitely not finished. Also, because there are so many frames for me to talk about, I'm probably going to have to skip showing you the full process for a lot of them, and we'll only talk about the more interesting parts. The next 2 frames are for the lyrics I'm struggling to know if I can. So I'm drawing Doris looking nervous and like she's struggling a bit. These are 2 frames, but I kind of only need to draw 1 frame and then edit it. For the second frame, I move Doris down a tish, move her irises to the other side, and also change her eyebrows. Oh, also you may see it throughout the footage, but I add a subtle lighter and darker gradient to the art to make it look more interesting. It's an easy way to make the grayscale look better without too much work. Oh, also, I was working on a gray canvas at the start to make things easier on my eyes, but I do switch to a white canvas eventually. The gray background was starting to mess with my values, so I switched over to white, even if it does kind of start to hurt my eyes after a little while. I just try to make sure to take breaks. Frames 6, 7, and 8 are of Doris walking through the crowd. Like I said, I'm drawing a lot of images for this animatic within a short amount of time, so I'm taking shortcuts to make things go faster. Like I used a 3D model and posed it into the pose I want and then sketched over it. I also used a 3D model backpack. I didn't really want to include the backpack, but since it's the start of school, I figured Doris would have it with her. Plus, it kind of helps give the feeling of a weight or burden that Doris is dealing with. That sounds kind of cool and metaphorical, and I wish I had thought of that since the start, and that's why I included the backpack, but it really wasn't. Also, to make the scene feel more dramatic, I make it so we can't see all of Doris's face. To give the idea that Doris is walking, I'm going to edit my first drawing and change her legs. One frame has her legs next to each other and is moved up a bit. The other has the legs in the opposite position of the first frame. One nice part about the backpack and the fact that Doris is holding the straps of it is that I don't need to change how her arms are positioned. Also, for later when I'm adding the animation details, I'm going to have a crowd on a separate layer and it'll move as the frames for Doris walking plays. This will give the idea that she's moving through the crowd. Originally for the lyrics that are bothering me through the weekend, I was going to have a chibi Doris thinking about her weekend, but decided to instead draw 2 frames of her walking as they kind of transition to the next frames that start at the chorus of the song. And once again, I'm using a 3D model to help me get an idea of where I want to place things and how I want the perspective to be. Using 3D models definitely helps speed up the process. It makes it so I don't have to do my first sketch of figuring out how I want things. I can instead go straight into what is usually my second sketch. I use 3D models often for my webcomic, especially for scenes with more complicated perspective or group scenes where I want to make sure characters stay in the same spots with different camera angles. Frame 11 is for the lyrics "My Heart Keeps Thumping," and this is when Doris sees Chase. Also, I did switch which side of the screen Doris is on. I wish I could say it was for a complicated composition reason, but it's because I wanted to draw her hair part on this side. It's always easier for me to draw her hair when she is turned to the right instead of turned to the left. I wish I had more to say for this frame, but yeah, I just kind of drew Doris. I wonder how many times I've drawn her. It's probably a lot with how many panels I've drawn of her over the years and just the different sketches and illustrations. I could try to count them all, but that'd probably be a lot of work. I've probably drawn her a few hundred times at this point. Anyways, now we're seeing what Doris is reacting to. It's Chase socializing in the hallway, like the extrovert he is. And I'm going to take a shortcut again. I remembered I had a drawing of Chase in side view that I used for my webcomic, so I copied that in and drew over it. And yeah, I warned you at the start, I'm going to be taking a lot of shortcuts to save time. And if I have to trace over my own work to save time, I will. A lot of times for fancy panels of my webcomic, I'll draw the character on their own canvas at a higher resolution than needed. That way I can more easily edit it for my comic pages. I'm actually not a huge fan of this side view now. It's from a few chapters ago, but it's the most recent one I have, so I went with it. And I kind of just changed things when I drew over it. For frame 13 and 14, Chase is going to glance over and then turn and wave at Doris. Frame 13 was easy, I just had to change the eye a bit. And for frame 14, I brought in a 3/4 view of Chase and used it as a base for drawing over to mush with my side view drawing. Also, I might be able to show you more of the footage now. At this point, I had turned on the recording feature in Clip Studio Paint. I forgot to turn it on at the start like I usually do. I was having a lot of recording issues with this footage for some reason. I kept forgetting things. But this footage doesn't zoom in and out and go all crazy, so I'm able to speed it up more without making you all super dizzy. Now we are at the chorus, and it says, "'Cause I'm shy, I don't know what to do." In reaction to Chase's wave, Doris gets flustered and a bit surprised. I have the frames transition from a kinda surprised face to a more surprised and slightly embarrassed face. I kept almost forgetting to include frames changing. Like at first I was only going to draw just the more shocked face, but thought it would be good to add more movement by including the less shocked face first. It makes the second one have more impact, I feel like. Plus the whole point of the animatic is to show the pictures with a bit of movement, so I need to make sure to include it. For frame 17, we have Doris walking away. To help me keep things in proportion with my first drawing, I drew lines coming off of my drawing to help me know where the proportions need to go. You often see people do this when drawing reference sheets for characters. I know that's something I used to really struggle with. When I would draw characters in different views, their proportions would change because I didn't know how to do various proportions for different views. But as I practiced over the years, I learned how to change them to match the character I am drawing. It's something I still kind of struggle with sometimes, but I've gotten better at it. Like if a character is in front view and then they turn to side view, their eye position doesn't completely change. Frames 18 and 19 were super easy. I just needed to draw some lockers and then another frame with a locker opening. I was planning to have this shot zoomed in on Doris's hand opening the locker, but this felt like the easier option, plus it will leave room for the lyrics when I add them later. Speaking of adding lyrics, I should have planned where I was placing them a bit more. It was a bit tricky later because I sometimes didn't really leave myself enough space. Frame 20 is Doris kind of sticking her head into her locker because she wants to hide like the lyrics are suggesting. I was pleased I was able to come up with a little scenario for this music. In my head when I was imagining the animatic, I kind of just kept seeing random images that didn't really connect at all. So it's nice that they do connect in some kind of way. Frames 21 and 22 were really simple. I just took my front view drawing of Doris and resized it so it zoomed in on the lower half of her face. In the second frame, I edited her mouth to make her be sighing. Frames 23, 24, 25, and 26 are all of Chase walking across the screen. He's looking for Doris and then sees her. And to no one's surprise, I used 3D models to plan out the poses. Also, I drew them all at once like this, but I will put them on their own frames so that they play one after the other. My work does end up being a bit more stiff when I use 3D models. It's why I often avoid using them for illustrations or other work. But when I need to work fast and efficiently, they are a great help, especially since I don't care as much since each frame isn't on screen for very long. I tend to care more about illustrations because they are often looked at for longer and they're supposed to show off my skills a bit more, I suppose. But when it comes to my comic and animation stuff, I try to not be as picky or else everything is going to take me ages to finish. We are now getting to the final frames. We have this one of Doris turning towards Chase. Once again, to try to add more movement, I added this one that shows the back of her head first and then we get more of a feel for her turning. Then we have Doris kind of leaning into a wave to greet Chase. I drew over my other frame to help the proportions be similar. And then we have the final frame, and the lyrics here are "Step out of my comfort zone." And to make things feel whimsical, I'm only going to have silhouettes of the characters. I say it's to make things feel whimsical, and it kind of is, but I also was getting so tired by this last frame and I just wanted it to be done. So I took 3D models, clipped a layer to them, and covered them with gray, and then added the details to make it look like Chase and Doris. I was originally actually going to draw them in side view, but me being tired and just wanting to be done made me come up with this option. And I actually do kind of like it. I feel like it gives the idea that we're kind of leaving and that the video is ending. But yeah, we are done with all the frames now. Yay! Now it's time to line them all up to the music. For this, I am using my usual editing software, Adobe Premiere Pro. I dragged in my music and basically just go through the song and try my best to make things line up to the words. This was a little tricky and required me to go through the song a lot and replay parts several times until I was pleased. Once I had placed all the frames, I go through and add some zooming in effects to them. I do this by playing around with the scale of the pictures and placing keyframes where the scale changes. Premiere Pro then makes it so it changes from less zoomed in to more zoomed in a smooth way. This is a nice way to add motion without needing to draw more pictures. And I do it on several different spots, especially for frames that are held for a longer amount of time. For Doris walking, I bring in her frames and have them loop over and over to give the appearance of her walking. And like I mentioned earlier, I drag in the crowd on the layer behind her. This time I play around with the position setting and set different keyframes to make the crowd move. Also, to help things feel a bit smoother, I do make the frames fade into each other. I do this by selecting both frames and pressing Ctrl D on my keyboard. This is the shortcut for adding a fade transition between images or video. Once I added all the fading and zooming, it was time for the lyrics. I thought the first part, making the images line up, was a bit tedious. Well, this part was very tedious. I tried to play around with how I make the lyrics appear to keep things interesting. A few times I use a layer mask that is feathered to make the text have a crossfade. I did this by playing around with the path of the mask and setting keyframes for it. One of my favorite parts is where I have some of the text fade in, and then when the singer says must end, to make it feel a bit more impactful, I have those just pop in instead of fade in. For some reason, I really like that part. When the lyrics say my heart keeps thumping, I decided to have the text kind of pulse. I did this by changing the settings for the scale and setting keyframes. I'm sorry I'm not going super in depth on how I do the settings for the text stuff, but if I showed you step by step, this video would be way too long. And if you use Premiere Pro, this stuff isn't too complicated, or you can find tutorials on YouTube. That's what I did for some of this, and I'm kind of just giving you an overview of what I did. But yeah, I kind of just tried my best to make the lyrics line up with the music, and also make them appear in a way that kind of helps aid the feeling of the music. After many hours of work, the animatic is now done. So without further ado, here it is.
Here it comes again, struggling to know if I can. These thoughts of nervousness must end. They're bothering me through the weekend. Oh, my heart keeps thumping, blood pressure keeps racing. The sunshine, I don't know what to do. I wanna hide from the stress I can't get through. I'm shy. Shadow. Now's the time to step out of my comfort zone.
This was definitely a lot of fun to make. Like I said, I've always wanted to try making one of these, and I'm really glad I finally got to do so. It's another fun way to show my characters and see them kind of in motion. I feel like it turned out pretty nicely for my first try, and I hope you all like how it turned out. If you'd like to see me do this again sometime with some of my other characters, you can let me know. I would totally want to do this again. I had a lot of fun. Before we end, I want to say a super big thank you to my wonderful YouTube members and Patreon patrons for their support. It means so much to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!